Hi, my name's Walter, and welcome to the GT350 Garage. It's been a while since I posted my last video, and I thought I should give an update on my 1966 Shelby GT350 project and the channel itself. It's been a very busy summer. My job has required a bunch of extra time, and we've been in the middle of this unprecedented heat wave here in northern Utah for the summer of 2021. The garage itself is not air conditioned, and the temps in the evenings have been in the mid 90s to the low 100s for about 2 months now. It's simply too hot to work and try and produce videos in. So the videos have had to wait, and the work has had to wait. I have managed a few early mornings and a few weekends where I was able to dive a little bit deeper into the car, and the results of that effort has led me to the content for the update video that you're watching right now. In the process of wrapping up the cooling system, I stumbled onto some things that I missed during the inspection. So earlier this year, if you haven't watched it, I did a video where I went around the car and inspected the majority of the components that I was concerned about and talked about what was going to need to be done and what my game plan was. I've had to revise that a little bit because as projects go, things change. Some of the things that I found are resulting in parts delays, and other things are more serious and are just adding time to the project that I hadn't anticipated. So let's start with the steering system. I was under the car removing the oil pan. I'll get to that later. And while I was there, I discovered that the bottom seal in the gear case of the steering box had pushed out. And as a result, all of the grease is sitting on the frame rail and not in the steering box. Now, I don't know if this is going to be serviceable or not, so I'm anticipating having to put a steering box in the car. While I was at it, I did some further inspection on the tie rod ends, and the car is going to get tie rod ends, a roller idler arm, and bump steer kits. And so I just decided if I'm going to do this car, I might as well do it right and make the car the best it can possibly be. So the steering system is going to get a new box and the other parts that I just mentioned. And when it's done, this thing should feel nice and tight and drive really, really well. Now, some of you might be asking, am I going to go power steering? And the answer to that is no. This is a real Shelby, and these cars did not have power steering on them. And let's be honest, I'm not some 30-pound weakling, so I don't mind the manual steering. I actually kind of like it. It's very direct, and it has good feel when the steering box isn't worn out. So the steering system is definitely going to become a set of videos, and I'll show you guys the process of doing all of that. Moving on to the suspension. When I did the preliminary inspection, the suspension felt okay, but I took the springs out, and when I took the springs out, I found excessive play in the upper control arms, in the control arm shafts. The ball joints are not in the best of shape, and the lower arms look like they were replaced at some point with who knows what quality arm. So I've decided it's in my best interest to just go ahead and replace these parts, and I'm going to source some nice quality arms and use it as an opportunity to make a little upgrade. I'll be doing the Shelby Arning mod, and at the same time probably installing a negative wedge spacer in the ball joint just to kind of fix that ball joint angle. And since I'll have the control arms out of the car, I've decided instead of just replacing the strut rod bushings, I'm going to upgrade the car to an adjustable set of strut rods and use a monoball type strut rod bushing instead of the standard non-adjustable bushing that these cars came with. And I'll detail all of that in future videos and walk you guys through the parts choices and why I'm going with what I'm going. Also suspension related, in the rear I've decided the standard eyelet 5-leaf springs that I have for the car are probably going to be a little too stiff for the way the car is getting set up. So we're looking at putting a 4.5-leaf spring in the car and going to a mid-eye. That way if I have to adjust it with a block, I don't have much of a lowering block in the car at all. I'm not a big fan of lowering blocks, so if I use a lowering block, it's going to do double duty. I'll have them milled so that they correct the pinion angle at the same time, and that way I get the benefit of correcting the pinion angle to match the leaf springs and the setup that I'm working on, and I set my ride height where I want it. So all of that, again, I'm going to cover in detail as I go through that process. The other thing I'm going to do in the rear of the car is I've decided to use the Global West Delalume bushings in the back and shackles. It's a nice heavy-duty setup, and it should be enough for the way I'm going to drive the car that I won't need any kind of a pannered rod or Watts link or anything like that. So that's something that I've put some serious consideration into. I don't want to mod the car excessively because, again, it is a real Shelby. So with that being said, I'm going to move on to the brake system. And with the brakes, I still need to do the caliper mods, and I'm going to walk everybody through that. But one of the decisions that I made on this car was to move away from the factory disc brake master cylinder, which is the large top single reservoir. For safety purposes, I've decided it's in my best interest in the event of a failure to put a dual reservoir master cylinder on the car. I realize that aesthetically it does not look correct for the car, but it is one thing that I'm willing to sacrifice appearance for safety. And I would recommend any of you who are contemplating the dual reservoir system over a single reservoir master cylinder, go ahead and make that change. It's not a difficult task. The other brake related item is I've decided to replace the brake lines. This car is 55 years old. And at 55 years old, who knows what's in those brake lines? The fluid on this car hasn't been serviced in 30 years. There could be rust, there could be corrosion that I can't see. So it's fairly inexpensive to replace the brake lines, and I'm going to replace them with new stainless steel lines that for all intents and purposes should last the remaining life of the car. Now, steering, suspension, brakes, what brings that all together? Well, you gotta have wheels and tires, right? And I have the 10 spokes for the car, but I did plan on putting a 16x8 style or torque thrust style wheel on the car, and they are on back order. They are on back order until spring. So until those wheels become available, I can't really do everything that I want to do with the car, so that's okay. I'll put them on order. When they get here, they get here. And hopefully they're here by the time it's ready to hit the road in spring. Otherwise, I do have the 10 spokes for the car, and I can drive on those for a while. The rear end is something that I've decided to tackle. I had ordered bearings and seals and intended to just freshen up the wheel ends. But I've decided that because this is a 55-year-old car and I have in the past had higher mileage Ford 28 spline axles fail. I've actually had them shear off at the bearing and leave the car. I've decided to put a set of 31 spline axles in the car, and so I'll be ordering a set of aftermarket forged axles to go in the stock rear end housing. And that is a small concession that I am 100% willing to make. It's a stronger axle, and then under my workbench I have a 31 spline traction lock 350 gear 9-inch pumpkin assembly, and I'll go through, freshen that up, make sure it's ready to rock and roll. And yes, I'm going to pull the 389s out of the car and put a 350 gear in the car. I think that will be a better match to the car, to some of the other things that I'm going to be doing. In addition to doing the gear swap, I'm also going to put an aluminum drive shaft in the car. Let's be honest, it's just a nice little addition. It'll smooth things out. It frees up a little rotating mass. Aluminum drive shaft's the way to go. Now, to get the power to the rear end, I have to do something about the transmission. The stock T10 that's in this car has been popping out of gear for as long as I've been associated with this car. And I know what the problem is, and it requires a major overhaul of the T10. And I have been long planning a T5 swap. I have a T5Z 5-speed transmission to go in the car. When I do that, the car is going to be getting a lightweight aluminum flywheel, better clutch, and I have decided to ditch the factory Z-bar linkage, drill 2 small holes in the firewall, and use a modern driveline hydraulic clutch setup. Because let's be honest, it's a really nice setup, and it resolves all of the problems that the factory Z-bar setup can and does have. So that's all going to take place sometime this winter. Because the biggest issue I found with the installation of the cooling system components was when I went to reseal the oil pan, I told myself, you know, I'm here, I should just check the bottom end of the engine out and see what the condition of things is. And not having regular oil changes, the bearings are in pretty bad shape. I have done a little bit of research on this car. I have receipts dating back to 1967, which is really cool because it lets me do things based on a real knowledge of what has happened to this car in the past. But I found receipts where the rod bearing inserts have been replaced in this car. Not once, not twice, 4 times. And that's in the 35,000 miles that are on this short block. This is a service short block that was installed by Ford in the early 70s. And after it was installed, apparently the car just never ran right. It seemed like it was always in for the carburetors being rebuilt, the points being replaced, and rod bearings, oddly enough. This car got spark plugs and rod bearings almost sequentially every time. And that's kind of a weird scenario, but I can understand why, and that is because this car has a vibration. It has always had a vibration as long as I've been associated with the car. And from building hundreds of small block Fords, I can tell you that this vibration has to be either something wrong with the flywheel, something wrong with the balancer, or something wrong with the crankshaft. And whatever the case may be, something is wrong and it's significant. And as a result, I'm going to pull the engine out of the car. I'm not going to try and proceed with this engine. And that has actually been one of the reasons that I have not been able to do the final video for the cooling system, where I show how to properly tune one of these engines for temperature control. Now, I did have someone come here to the house and we worked on his car and managed his cooling system issues, and I will be putting together a video using the content that I filmed on that car. But as far as using this car for any kind of running demonstrations, that's kind of out of the question now. I decided not to put oil back in it and to just simply pull the engine. So that's the update for summer of 2021. And if you have any questions, by all means, leave a comment in the comment section. I try and answer everyone as quickly as possible. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and the links are in the description below. With that, I thank you for watching. I hope you've subscribed, and if you like the content when you watch it, hit that like button. It's nice to get that feedback. So I thank everyone for watching, and I will see you soon.